Welcome to Southwest Yard and Garden. I'm Curtis Smith. Last time we began a new feature called Southwest Gardening 101, which covered the basics of growing houseplants here in the Southwest. Some things are the same as in other parts of the country, but our environment gives us certain differences, which we have to consider when we grow plants. We finished talking about growing plants in water, using only water and no soil. We had talked about how the soils are very alkaline, have a lot of salts in it, and so does our water. And we have to consider that. This is a potato plant, sweet potato, growing in tap water. And here in the tap water, the water evaporates as the plant grows. That leaves the salt behind in the container. And so periodically we have to top the water off, adding more salt. A good thing for us to do then is to pour this water off and rinse it with a few changes of fresh tap water. That then allows us to rinse some of the salt out and will allow us to grow this potato in the water for several years. We can start new cuttings periodically and start with fresh water when we do that. But this is an easy way to grow some houseplants, but not all houseplants can be grown in water. More often, we'll grow houseplants in a pot which contains soil. We have to water this, and typically we'll water from the top. We put the water in, and often we'll have this dish underneath it to catch the water as it drains through. It's important that we have that to protect our furniture and let the water drip through, because we want this to wash surplus salts out. Sometimes, however, the soil has contracted in the pot. When we water, the water runs around the soil. It doesn't moisten the soil. In that case, we have to take some extreme measures to make sure we get some water in there. But most of the time, we'll just water. Let the water run through. And then once that's happened, we want to pour the surplus water away. That way we don't have the water soaking back up, bringing the salts back into the soil. Our soil is naturally salty, as we've said in the earlier segment. The water is salty, and if we accumulate salt in the soil, it will begin burning the roots of the plants. It will begin doing a lot of damage to the plants. We want to eliminate that as much as we can by flushing the salts with each watering. This won't work forever. We'll have to repot periodically. And that's one of the considerations here in the Southwest, is that we do have more frequent repotting needs. Another thing you can do, though, such as with this jade plant, this is a plant which does not like too much water. Very often the soil will shrink away from the side of the pot, so we have to use the extreme measure to re-moisten it. So what we can do is set it into a container of water and let it sit there. Right now it's so light that it'll float, but as it absorbs water, it will settle down, sit in here. We can let the water absorb up into the soil. Now we're bringing the salt into the soil, as we said we don't want to do. We want to be very careful about that. But let it soak up the water, and then to remove it, make sure as it's moist, we've got surplus water, it'll drip out, and this will then carry the salt out into another container. So we can, after watering it, set it in another container. Let it drain away. The soil has moistened because it's watered from below, but the salts have drained away as we let the surplus water drain out. If we're going to fertilize, we need to make sure the soil is moist when we fertilize. That'll do less damage to the plant, and the soil will be more likely to hold that fertilizer instead of letting it run around the side of the soil where it's pulled away from the pot. But it's always important to make sure the soil is moist before you apply a fertilizer, a liquid fertilizer, to the pot. And we want to consider the kinds of pots we use. Make sure that there is drainage. Here's one where you can't see the drainage. It has the dish connected underneath it. But when you water the plant, water flows through it, collects in the dish, protecting whatever surface it's sitting on. And then you want to pour off the surplus water. You may have to tip it several times to get the water poured off. And be careful that you don't damage the plant while you're doing that. We have a plant growing in a real pot just like that. It's got the dish underneath it. The plant's doing fairly well, needs more light. But this one's doing well. You have to be careful with these, though, because I can see salt crust beginning to form on the surface of this. So the salts are accumulating. I'm not doing a good enough job of pouring the water off as I water this plant. It is difficult to do. And because of this concern, a lot of people want to use bottled waters. Be aware that some bottled waters have minerals in them, so you're not avoiding the problem. Tap water and some bottled waters have minerals. There are the types that don't have minerals, the deionized water, the distilled water. You can use them, but when you do that, there's no minerals. The plants need some minerals. So you have to be sure and fertilize when you use those. You don't have to fertilize every time you water, but you'll fertilize with a liquid fertilizer more often if you're using the deionized and the distilled waters. Thank you for watching this show about houseplants in the Southwest. We hope this has been useful to you. It is different here. Some things are the same, but there are some differences, especially our light, our soil, and our water.